If you spend any amount of time in a Christian church, you probably will be encouraged to be like Jesus. That's kind of what Christianity is all about, right? The word Christians basically means like little miniature Christs. And so when someone encourages you to be like Jesus, what usually comes to mind is loving people better, being more humble, or some other positive Christian value, like fruit of the Spirit kind of stuff. But there's also a different side of Jesus. Let me read this for you. It's out of the book of Matthew in chapter 21, starting with verse 12. Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves. It is written, Jesus said, "My house will be called a house of prayer, but you are making it a den of robbers." Here we've got Jesus coming in and literally flipping the tables. This is not the calm and stoic Jesus, not the precious moments Jesus that we're maybe used to. This is a Jesus who isn't afraid to make a scene, to cause a visible disruption. In the name of what? Why was Jesus so angry? You see, people came to the Jewish temple from all over the Roman Empire to make sacrifices. And because it was pretty inconvenient to bring, several animals along on the journey, most people had to buy the animals that would be sacrificed when they got there. And to do that, they'd use all different kinds of currencies from wherever that they were from. And the sellers would often inflate the prices as part of the money-changing process, which directly hurt the poor. And so part of the reason that Jesus is mad is because of this economic injustice that he's seeing. But Jesus, he wasn't just angry at the sellers. He was angry at the whole economic system that had infiltrated and perverted the worship of God. What started as a solution to this practical problem had quickly become all-encompassing to the point where the actual purpose of the temple, which was prayer and communion with God, was actually no longer possible. And so Jesus, he comes in and he starts cleaning house. He's following in the footsteps of the great prophets of the Old Testament, where Jesus uses that phrase, den of robbers. It's the exact phrase that the prophet Jeremiah used when he called out the religious corruption in his day. Now, if we're trying to be like Jesus, like the goal of Christianity, then we need to ask ourselves, is there anything in this story that we should emulate? But before we answer, we need to realize that this wasn't the way that Jesus normally operated. Remember, this is the same Jesus who also tells us to turn the other cheek if someone hits us. But I do believe that there is something to be emulated by average Christians. I think there are plenty of cases when we Christians need to flip the tables. Too often, we Christians are silent in the face of injustice or sin. And we usually do this in the name of preserving unity. Too often, we're silent in the name of preserving the peace with other Christians in our lives, not wanting to rock the boat. When we see sin present in our midst, whether with someone in our friend group or small group or even with a church leader, our default is to avoid confrontation and to let it continue. This passage, it reminds us that sometimes we need to flip the tables. What might that look like in your own life? Let's say someone in your small group says something that's blatantly racist, or maybe something that denigrates women, or is just hurtful or shaming towards someone else in the group. Well, you may be tempted to let it slide. We need to let this side of Jesus remind us that it is sometimes worth disrupting the relational peace in order to confront sin. But we need to be careful not to become the very thing that we're calling out. There are people who point to this specific passage to give themselves permission to be a jerk. I recently read an article, and we can link to it in the description. It's called "Jesus Flipping the Tables Isn't an Excuse for Your Online Rants." And I'm not saying that we become a call-out culture or something like this, but we do need to be aware that our default is to let sinful patterns continue. There's a famous quote by John Stuart Mill that says, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing." And so we need to remember that in our calling to be Christians, to be these little Christs, this doesn't just mean emulating the love everybody Jesus, but also the Jesus that is willing to fight for justice and truth, even when it is hard or disruptive. Have a good day.